Hi everybody, it's Nan from The Art of Intuition, and today we're going to talk about re-entering an old timeline and a few signs that show us we have entered an old timeline, and how exactly do we do that. Now, technically, you're always going to be in a higher timeline, but you'll be clearing energy from an old timeline that's still kind of running through your current timeline, right? So it's kind of like a little worm that's still kind of in all your timelines. And the situation I'm going to give today is going to be one that I just did myself. The example I'm going to give today, I did this. I re-entered an old timeline. And how we do that is energetically. So that's when I'm talking about, even though you're in a different timeline, I went back to my 2019 timeline and I re-entered in all of that energy. Now, in a way, I was still clearing the energy from my 2019 timeline, and I was going back into an old situation that I no longer needed to do anymore, and I recreated it. Now, I recreated it and it ended in a week, because you'll also see that when you get into your higher consciousness, you can see how all the timelines intersect and how one thing you do here created the entire timeline, and you understand how it got created. So sometimes you'll find they come back very quickly. Sometimes you might remember something you did 2 or 3 months ago, and you'll understand that that has now come back, and you've been in that timeline, in and out of that timeline perhaps, for that long. You can just see the correlation a lot quicker. That's why, and you have the capacity to see the correlation, where in your human consciousness, you cannot see the correlation. You don't understand everything you do affects everything else. You create everything. You don't see that. And that's one of the big things that happens when you start ascending your consciousness. You understand that. So the more you understand that, you are very careful what you do and the energy you do it from, because that's going to depict the timeline you're in. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean you're in an old timeline if it's the same situation, or a person that was maybe around in 2019 and all of a sudden they come back in. That could be letting you clear something in that timeline, right? In that older timeline, possibly. It's the energy you come from that's going to depict your timeline, right? It's your vibration. That's what's going to depict your timeline. Now, I ordered something online and I spent like an hour trying to find like the cheapest price, which I used to do back in 2019 because I didn't have a lot of money in 2019. I was transitioning out of human realities into higher consciousness realities, and money doesn't really transfer over from human realities to higher line realities. Human money's tainted in a sense. You can't really take it with you. So you can take it with you to a point. That's a different video, which maybe I'll do that next time. It kind of shifts, right? So I had gone through a time when I used to have tons of money, and I never really thought about money, and I wasted a lot of money, and then you don't get a lot of money in the beginning in the higher line realities because you can't be trusted with it, right? So I was always really careful about everything I would do and how much money I would spend and how much money I was spending. So I got to, now I'm in 2022, and I found myself stressing about ordering contact lenses and going through this whole looking at all these different sites and getting pissed about shipping costs, and I was just in this whole mindset. And so 45 minutes I circled around this, and I'm like, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. Just order the damn contacts and move on. But I had gone through, now part of that is I'm clearing programming that I still had about worrying about every penny I spent, because that's what I had to do in 2019, because I was being taught a lesson on what money is for. Money is to support your body, your light body, and that might be what you have to surround it with. It is not for things you don't need to support your light body, that you want for more external. You're getting it for the wrong reason. It's a more external focus than an internal focus. That's kind of how the best way for me to kind of describe it, right? You still buy things for yourself and spend money on yourself. There might go through a phase you didn't. It kind of depends. We're always going to be doing the opposite when we get into our higher line realities. Like, I always spent money on myself, but for the wrong energy. The wrong energy was going into that. It was more for to impress someone else than it was for taking care of myself, right? So when I went into my higher line realities, I didn't get a lot of money to spend on myself because I'd already done that. So you have to kind of go the opposite way. So I don't know. I went around this barn. I don't know what I was doing for like 45 minutes, and finally I was like, "What am I doing? This is ridiculous." Order the contacts, and I did. Week came, I didn't get them, and I looked, and they had been shipped to my address in 2019. And I was like, "That's bizarre. I would never type that address in." But energetically, I did type that address in because the energy I was in a lot of fear and lack about money and panic about money, which I really in that moment had no reason to be. But it was just clearing kind of an old habit I had picked up, which in the time I was doing it in 2019, it was a lesson I had to learn. But now I'm kind of past that now. But I still felt like I was in 2019, like money was not, there was not a lot in 2019 because I was being taught a lesson. Now, technically in the higher realms, you're always going to have everything you need and money will always be there. Lots of money will be there. It's not finite in the higher realities, but you don't get it till you can be trusted with it. Also, there's a point to that when you get into the higher dimensional realities too. So I decided I was going to take my lumps because I knew when I saw my 2019 address, I had entered into an old timeline because of the energy of which I started it with. I was in all that fear energy, lack energy when I ordered the contacts. So that was a timeline I created. And all of a sudden, I got complete confirmation of that when my 2019 address was on there because my universe is basically telling me, okay, if you want to be in 2019, we're just going to ship all your shit to 2019 because what are you playing in? This is not where you are anymore. Now you have to play in a higher aligned reality where you have to spend more money. And if that means you have to spend 5 times what you used to spend on contacts, that's what you're now going to do. So just stop it. Just stop it. So I called because I knew I had to. Part of me wanted to send an email to see, but I was going to call because I knew my universe, a higher aspect of me, was going to be talking to me. And it was not going to be a pleasant conversation because I was about to get reamed by that higher aspect of me, basically telling me, what are you doing? Because it's not so much about the contacts, it's about what it was showing me, right? Bigger things you have to go do now, and you can't stay in that old energy. And that's also what's hampering the new energy to come in because you're still kind of playing in this old stuff where you don't have enough money, which is not true. So I called, and of course, the lady wasn't super pleasant to me, but I, once again, did not expect it to be because I was being scolded a tad bit by my universe in this sense. And she said, well, you typed that address in. And I was like, no, I didn't, but I knew energetically I had. So all I could say was, yes, I did it. It was my mistake. I did that. So I can just order them again, pay double, whatever. It's kind of dependent on what I have to do. And, my universe was kind to me. And, the woman acting as my higher self in that moment said, you know what, we're just going to send you, we're going to give you a one-time thing. We're just going to send them to your new address. I thanked them. I went on to write a review of the company because I was very pleased with that and very happy my universe was so kind to me. But she also said, we're only going to do this once. And I knew that was my universe saying, we're only going to do this one more time. That was it. From now on, you stop playing in that old energy or all your shit's going to be shipped to an old address. So look at the energy you're in when you start something. And if it's older energy, and part of it's you're still clearing out an older program, but it's going to show you when you're in an old timeline. If people show up from old timelines, that can be a sign you're in an old timeline, but only if you go into the energy of that old timeline. Me buying the contacts didn't put me in an old timeline. Me buying the contacts out of fear and lack and a little bit of greed, for whatever reason, because I was looking for the cheapest shipping cost, it was ridiculous. I wasted 45 minutes on this. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. But that's what happens when we get into our human programming and we're clearing out something. That can happen where we get all bound up in the stupidest thing. And we have to really look at that and say, what am I doing? I don't need to do this anymore. There was a time when it was a lesson, now it's not anymore. So look at kind of what you're spent up on. It's more the energy of which you go into it with. That depicts the timeline. This is energy I was clearing in 2019. This is not energy of which I am in now, in a sense. Now, in a way, it's still there because I was still clearing it, but I could dip back into that old timeline. So if an old person from the past shows up, which you're going to deem as the past because you haven't seen him in a while, look at the energy you're coming from. Because if you expect the same thing, you're going to act the same way you did back then. you're now going to enter in and recreate that whole timeline again. So in a way, I more recreated that old timeline. Maybe that's a better word of saying it. Instead of re-entering it, I recreated it. And be prepared to see that timeline come to an abrupt halt. One, the higher your consciousness goes, you don't have time to play in that shit anymore. What might have been a 7-year timeline to complete, maybe over a bigger thing where you might see, well, that was a 7-year cycle for me to clear all the karma I created back then. Because we're not just clearing the karma in this reality, we're clearing the karma in all our realities. You're going to see things come back very quickly to bite you. And like I said, this was a week. And I kind of knew when I was doing it, but it's almost, you get so deep in the program and you can't even see yourself doing it. Like you're almost outside looking at yourself like, what are you doing? Are you seriously doing this right now? And yeah, so look at the energy you're starting it with. If you're going to go back to your old energy, you're now going to re-enter that timeline, aka you're recreating that timeline all over again. So look when things get shipped to old addresses. Look when old people show up. Look when you're avoiding people. Look at the energy you're coming from. That depicts your timeline. So, okay. Keep practicing the art of intuition.